the idea that we're going to default to the debt has been like hanging over the U.S. economy now for 20 years. We every once in a while get scares where some debt rating agency starts looking a little skeptical at U.S. debt and starts to downgrade it a little bit, and then there's like a massive freak out and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say that we're going to see some serious downgradings and quality ratings of U.S. debt in the coming year.
Thanks for watching this RTD interview. Don't forget to pick up your RTD Scary George round. Now enjoy this interview. Welcome to another RTD interview. Today I'm excited to have first-time guest, Mr. Jeffrey Tucker. He's an author as well as an editorial director for the American Institute of Economic Research. And today he's joining us on Rethinking a Dollar to give us his thoughts and analysis as to where we're at now and where our current monetary system is going. So Jeffrey Tucker, welcome to RTD Interviews.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I appreciate you taking time to join us here. And as always, looking forward to getting your thoughts on where we're at and where we're heading and possibly some solutions to this monetary madness we're in. But before we dive into that, for those in the RTD viewership that may not be familiar with Jeffrey Tucker, can you give us a little bit of information as to your background and how you've arrived at this point in your career?
Sure. Well, I went to undergraduate economics and then journalism school, then graduate economics, and didn't finish my PhD, so there's that. But immediately went into editorial work, and I've been a publisher and editor, ever since. At the Mises Institute, Laissez-Faire Books, started my own company, and worked for the Foundation for Economic Education. But I'm very happy now to be at the American Institute for Economic Research. We were founded in 1933. At that very time, and because of the confiscation of gold by FDR, and we're over here in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and that gold confiscation affected this area of the country profoundly. And the American Institute for Economic Research really fought very hard from 1933 onward against that. So we're in a very similar situation today as when we were founded, and we're fighting hard today too.
Right. So let's dive right into it. So based upon the current response to this global health pandemic, I'm curious to find out, is there anything that really caught you by surprise or anything that really has you extremely concerned that we can just start off with for this?
Well, the lockdowns itself, are mysterious. So it's like, we're going about our lives and everything was fine. There's a virus. We've had viruses. We had them in 2009, 2006, and so on. We've dealt with viruses all our lives. In 1957, 1949, 1952, 1968, 1969. Suddenly this one, it was like, oh, man, we got to lock down everything. And trying to figure out exactly how that happened is occupying a lot of my time. In fact, I spent most of the morning reviewing a 2007 CDC document that really mapped out what school closures and mandatory social separation, is, and it was really, honestly, the more I look at it, the more it just seems as if the COVID-19 was just the excuse to perform a massive social experiment in control, and honestly, I think it very quickly got out of hand. There's nobody that I've talked to, even the architects of the 2007 plan, are willing to own this lockdown and the astonishing consequences. They never really thought it through. And they wanted to see what it looked like, just to have fun for a couple of weeks. They didn't expect that the lockdowns would go on this long and that sort of thing. And then the second and third tier responses, monetary policy. The Fed is a completely different institution today than it was 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. The spending is out of control. The debt, the shutdowns of travel, the whole thing is just a level of wackiness that I never thought I would see in my lifetime ever. I think in saying that I'm speaking for millions, tens of millions of Americans who completely agree with you.
I would agree. And also, one thing I've noticed, and so in the great state of Michigan, from on the political side of things, Governor Whitmer here has become very dictatorship-like with her response to this, and the numbers are not really adding up. But yet here, there's not many people putting up resistance or a pushback outside of some people, arming themselves and going to the Capitol. But other than that, people are starting to accept this narrative that we need to be cautious and socially distance ourselves. So all these new terms we're being introduced to leads me to suspect something that there's a greater agenda behind this as well. But then you hinted at the Federal Reserve response. and so they're not the same as you said. I think it was 6 months ago. So I'm
No.
assuming you're going back to September when something sprung a leak with the repo market activity, or what exactly are you
Well,
referring to?
that was a little bit of a cloud no bigger than a man's hand, as they say. You know, the repos, the markets were already under pressure a little bit. I don't think anything like a calamitous crash is coming or anything like. But you know, the Fed's been a little bit responsible for the last couple of years. You know, with the the constantly giving in to pressure from the White House for growth, and they've just been manipulating the interest rates, and without a lot of success though. But during this crisis, I mean, it's been crazy. It's a little bit like they've been trying to revive the economy or keep the economy going in some way, but you can't do that under a lockdown. I mean, it's a little bit like trying to make a man without legs run faster by giving him methamphetamine. You know, that's not going to end well, and that's what the Fed's been doing, trying to keep this thing called the economy going during a time when the economy is forcibly shut down. And so it doesn't make any sense. So now the Fed has like wildly exceeded its mandate, wildly. And think about it. It's doing this not in a time of financial crisis. That's actually one of the very interesting things about this whole thing that's happened. You know, thank God we've not actually experienced anything like a financial crisis yet. Wall Street continues to run. These markets are still open. You can still get cash out of your ATM machines. Banks, people are a little suspicious. People are pouring out a lot of cash and using a lot of cash and that sort of thing. But really, we've not really seen anything like runs, or it's not like 2008. So despite this, despite the fact that the monetary and financial system more or less continue to function, and again, I'm so grateful for that. Despite that, the Fed is engaged in unprecedented levels of buying of anything and everything with newly printed money, and that goes for stocks. We don't even know what they're doing. It's outrageous how they've exceeded their mandate, and we've been trying to blow the whistle on this. They've gone way beyond what the law ever allowed the Fed to do, and I just don't know how they get back, how they're going back from this. I mean, a lot depends on what the actions are going to be, you know, after we gradually open over the coming months. They've got to sop up this liquidity, and they're going to be in a massive, they're going to be owners of all kind of new assets that they're going to have to dump right away, and they're going to have to sop up a lot of the liquidity they created, or else they risk seriously destabilizing markets around the world.
Right, and so so prior guests has mentioned that, you know, the dollar swap mechanisms, because dollars are in demand for all the debt issued throughout the last how many ever years. And so a lot of people say that there's going to continuously be a need for continuous liquidity provided for foreign markets and whatnot. And so can that be something that they can continue to provide without losing control of things?
Well, they maybe think that they can, and they're banking a lot on their experience in 2008, because they successfully propped up the entire banking system while keeping a lid on monetary expansion, you know, by paying the interest on the reserves. So they're going to be doing tricks like that in the coming days, but they're also going to be very much under pressure, political pressure, to change these negative numbers, you know, this unprecedented negative numbers, into something that's a little less pessimistic going into the election, so that, you know, Trump can brag about how he brought the economy back. So I think the Fed's in a really serious bind. You know, honestly, like, people have always asked me, what's the biggest Fed? You know, extreme deflation or extreme inflation? You know, the problem with predictions about that is it's really contingent about what happens to velocity of money. So in other words, you know, that calculation that goes into, you know, what happens to prices is very highly contingent upon the behavior of the public, on what we do with dollars. Are we going to go out and spend, or are we going to get super risk averse, like they did in 1933 and 34 and 35, or like what happened in 2009, 2010, you know, because velocity collapsed after that. And I'm assuming that that's going to be the case now. I mean, you can't like shut down the economy like overnight and leave people without any time to prepare. I mean, like, a lot of people didn't have savings to pay their rent the next month, you know? Yeah. So this has really impacted, I would say, consumer sentiment in terms of the use of money. So I'm guessing that there's going to be, here's another thing too. In the last several months, people have learned that they can spend a lot less money and still get by. And that's kind of a new experience for a lot of people. So we could be seeing an extreme holding on to cash, you know, between now and the next couple of years. I mean, this has traumatized an entire generation. So given So the only way you're going to really generate a really extreme inflation is if the money is circulating. And if the money is not circulating, then there's nothing the Fed can do about that. I mean, it's just like dumping dollars down a hole. It just keeps filling up and filling up and filling up. And that, so I'm guessing that the near-term trends, at least, are going to be deflationary for the next 6 months. But once the optimism grows and people start to believe maybe that we're going to get back to normal, let's face it, we're living in a world where everybody's desperate to travel. People are anxious to get out. I mean, just going to restaurants, doing anything to seem to restore normal life. And then that could cause a flip in the other direction. And whether the Fed can maintain control, I don't know. I mean, we have records in the 20th century in which central banks, thought that they had it going and they had it right, only to wake up the next morning and see everything unravel. So I'm not ruling that out.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I'm concerned with, along with everything else, is the mainstream narrative that we're being given that on top of the response of the central bank as well as the government, we got Jerome Powell encouraging Congress to be more proactive in providing some fiscal response to this infrastructure spending, MMT. And so they're starting now to talk about relief for the people on top of all the other things they're being overly accommodative with. So do you see President Trump especially looking to really ramp up even more borrowing because of what he ran upon was infrastructure spending, and he's still pressing for negative rates and wanting to borrow, be the cheapest? Was it the cheapest? We should have a gift of having the cheapest rates or whatever, so we can borrow. And so that's in our future as well, in your opinion.
That's Trump's opinion, right? And that's what he's always been about debt. He's that is a weird dude. But like in his whole business career, that's how he made money. He just took outrageous amounts of risks, borrowed tremendous amounts of money, and tried to intimidate everybody into, he wasn't good at paying his debts. And then he would just desperately try these outrageous projects, some of which failed. But he believes in debt. It's the most interesting thing. The guy's a little bit strange. I heard an interview with him a couple of weeks ago, and he was regretting all the hotels having failed, right? All the hotels and resorts that are failing. And he said, a lot of these people weren't levered up enough. Listen, I was like, the reason the hotels were failing is that they weren't in debt enough. I mean, that's a very strange outlook on life. So he believes in debt, believes in spending, and believes in living on the edge and being all levered up. And that's what he's trying to do to the country too. So I mean, this guy we're not talking about like some old-fashioned Republican here. He doesn't believe in balancing the budget. And my God, the budget has just been blown up, by trillions and trillions. And you mentioned MMT, the ideology of endless inflation. It's getting worse and worse. People just think that, there's a magic printing press somewhere in Washington that can fix all problems. And there's no question that Trump's political opponents are trying to use this to basically put all Americans on a permanent income, welfare. And it's sorry to be so negative, but there's a lot of bad stuff going on right now.
Right, and that's a part of trying to decipher through and navigate through these waters, because they're unprecedented for everybody. So we're all getting a front row seat. We're all on the front line of this global meltdown. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts based upon your response to President Trump and his viewpoints on debt. A lot of people mentioned in alternative media around that he was brought in more so, or placed in the position he's in now, to oversee the debt default for our country, because he always wants to get the best deal. Do you see his love for debt and going negative and all that stuff being something that's a part of the restructuring or reset or reboot or whatever people call it, the monetary, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I don't see Trump actually choosing default, but Look, the idea that we're going to default to the debt has been like hanging over the U.S. economy now for 20 years. We every once in a while get scares where some debt rating agency starts looking a little skeptical at U.S. debt and starts to downgrade it a little bit, and then there's like a massive freak out or stuff like that. So yeah, I would say that we're going to see some serious downgradings and quality ratings of U.S. debt in the coming year. The one good thing about it, I don't want to say it's good, but the dollar is still the strongest currency in the world. It's like it's funny to have such a terrible dollar, but have it be still better than every other currency. One of the things that could change that, and this is a little bit complicated, but the dollar emerged as the world reserve currency after about 1973, 74, and it's stayed that way ever since. After we got off the Bretton Woods gold system, but one of the reasons for that is that the U.S. is the biggest promoter of global trade. So we reduced tariffs, dramatically between basically the end of the Second World War and then basically 2 years ago, right? At which point we reversed course. And so we're incentivizing all these other countries around the world, especially in the Far East and so on, and it's true for Europe, to figure out, in their dealings with Latin America, figure out ways that they can manage supply chains, excluding the legal volatility of the U.S. The U.S. has proved itself an unreliable partner in trade, and that more than anything else could put pressure on the international status of the dollar. Like, those go together. You can't both be against free trade or run a protectionistic trade policy where you're cutting off travel and cutting off trades and telling boats not to arrive and so on, and expect the dollar to continue to maintain its status as a world reserve currency. So that has definitely been under pressure already for the last 2 years. And it's still solid, but it's not as solid as it was, say, like 5 years ago. So that's another trend you can really watch.
Thanks for watching this interview. If you're enjoying content like this, feel free to become a part of the RTD community by becoming a member via Patreon. All it takes is a monthly contribution of about $5 a month for more great content such as this. Just scroll down beneath this video here and click the Patreon link, and then hit this tab right here to become a member of the team. Looking forward to bringing you more great content. Now, let's get back to this interview. Thanks. Interesting. Now, one of the things I want to definitely transition into, the problems are obvious. Now, it's more so protecting and preserving yourself in this current monetary fiasco. Never mind the health side of things, where that might end up with all the vaccinations and everything like that. But I'm
not taking one.
Yeah, so that's the thing. A lot of people feel very strongly about that as well. So yeah, that's that could take us down a whole nother rabbit hole. But as far as the transition of our monetary system, the Federal Reserve note happens still to be, it's the best of the worst of everything. So it's still something we're using, even though we're witnessing China and Russia and everybody de-dollarizing. That's a term that I've been talking about heavily for the last several years now. Right. And so there will come a day where the Federal Reserve note will not have the same purchasing power or be recognized internationally as a reserve asset. And so we're transitioning to the digital world. And so I know you're a proponent of the cryptocurrency sector. Yeah. And so the introduction of the digital dollar, e-dollar, that might be in the work as well as a part of these bailout packages eventually. Is that part of the future? And what would that look like? And how can people position themselves and prepare themselves for an environment like that?
Well, the Federal Reserve now for the last couple of years has been like desperately trying to create all these tools to compete with the private sector, what the private sector is already doing. Whether it's peer-to-peer payments, but they've been very slow, and all that stuff already exists in the private markets. I just think it's ridiculous. It would be like at this point, the FCC coming out with its own email system or something and urging us all to use it. We're going to be like, nah, man, we got this. So the Fed is trying and playing around with the idea of its own cryptocurrency. But the thing is, we have much better versions of cryptocurrency right now. My own attitude towards crypto is that, first of all, it's pretty interesting that Bitcoin has actually been very stable throughout this entire shutdown. You notice that here's the government telling you whether you're essential or unessential. You can open, you can't, you can have 25% capacity, you can't go to that park, you can't take that trip to Australia, but maybe you can. so they're regulating the whole course of our lives. Bitcoin didn't care. I mean, there wasn't any chance that Bitcoin could be shut down, and there's no way it can be shut down. So that's a very interesting thing, that none of the government's edicts have pertained to the crypto sector at all, and it's actually performed as stabilized and been good performance. And I don't mean just BTC, but I mean, all the other alternative currencies too, of which there are many, 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 many thousands, available in the US, but really all over the world. I mean, like most big companies in the Far East have, I don't want to say most, but many, many are floating their own tokens now as a kind of a just in case measure. Once that's part of de-dollarization, just, they're tokenizing their own assets. And that doesn't mean that they have to be great investments. All they have to do is be like useful tools for transferring value and settling accounts. That's the purpose of it, and have easy liquidity in and out of any other currency, which they do. So this is going to be a very important part of the monetary picture in the future. And I don't think that has anything to do with some cryptocurrency that the Fed creates. I don't even think that's going to be a player.
Right. Understandable. Now, one of the things, so for the Rethinking Dollar audience, majority of people are precious metals enthusiasts. And so we have a small few that's interested in hearing more about the cryptocurrency space. I never really dive too deep into it. And so one of the primary concerns is that, Mike, it was created by some fictitious person, Satoshi Nakamoto, and there's no privacy and all those things. So, can you share information with people that would probably provide a little bit of education as well as incentive to be open-minded to looking into it for themselves if that was something you might want to do?
Sure. Well, I don't have any problem with somebody who's skeptical about it, but it's a kind of it's a difficult thing to understand, really. But it is a form of property rights. What Satoshi did in the early days, we're talking about 2009, was created an economy in a digital space with real boundaries and property rights, so that the thing couldn't be infinitely replicated, and put its reproduction rate on a very strict protocol that's never been changed, actually. So what that did is it took a world where there's possibility for infinite reproduction and constrained it using blockchain technology, open source blockchain technology, so that everybody could watch it, and put it on a machine, basically, so that these units would be severely restricted, and they're finite in the case of Bitcoin. Not Litecoin and others are infinite, but Bitcoin itself is actually finite. So, and then we just watched it, and then the markets began to value this thing. It's like, okay, does this thing work? Yes, it does work. How many are there going to be? Well, there's a finite number. Well, maybe they're valuable on their own. So markets began to value them, and I was watching this thing from the point at which it was about $3, and watched it just kind of march up and down, up and down, up and down until it got as high as $19,000. Briefly, I guess about 3 years ago, but now it's stabilized around 10,000. I don't know if it's going to go up. I don't know if it's going to go down. I really don't know. I tend to think it's going to be like a gradual increase in the valuations over time, but I can't say that for sure. I predicted that it was going to settle at 10,000 and just kind of be up or down 1,000 or 2,000 for a very long time. And I think that's probably still true. So what do people use it for? Well, what they use it for now is mostly remittances and transferring of value outside of the banking system. That's what it's used for now. And in that case, the goal isn't to see it grow higher and higher and higher in value. The goal is just to see it work well. And indeed it has worked well as a technology. So I don't recommend that anybody. Here's the other thing. It's still really complicated. It's complicated to use, and you can easily make mistakes. And like I've been using it for many years, and there have been moments, I tell you, where I tried to flip somebody $2 and almost send them 20,000. Just with like one. The interfaces are a little sketchy. Like it's not like using your online bank where they're doing your thinking for you. Bitcoin wallets don't do that. You gotta know what you're doing. And I always think about this in terms of my mother. It's like, am I going to recommend people get involved in Bitcoin? Well, I want to be able to position to where I would recommend that my mother use it, and I'm not even right now, not even at that point.
I understand.
But let me just say too that actually the distribution of Bitcoin ATMs around the country and the world has been a huge thing and probably the most important innovation in the crypto space. So, and during the last 3 months, the sales of Bitcoin, they're very high premiums, by the way, 20%, outrageous.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you need to get money over to Mexico City, and you can't rely on the banks, what are you going to do? So people are going to these ATMs and they make it actually really easy. Expensive, but easy. And anybody can own and transfer Bitcoin that way. The privacy angle, yeah, that's a very serious matter because yes, once you're in the realm of Bitcoin, you can move it here, and nobody's going to know like who's sending, who's receiving, because it's all using double key cryptography. But it's almost impossible to buy Bitcoin right now without coughing up a tremendous amount of your personal information to these ATMs. So the privacy element, it's just not there. And any one of the records of any one of these companies could be immediately tapped by government. There's nothing they can do about it. So it's a little dangerous in that sense. Now, you want to talk about gold, and gold has performed very well in these months, actually. And in fact, the demand for gold is very high. It's performing right now its historic role as a store of value in times of crisis. And I think it's going to continue to do so. I mean, I would think that if you're worried about the next crisis, and you should be, that a diversity of holdings is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, moving forward, as we get ready to draw towards the end, I'm curious to get your long-term outlook. And so gold, silver are performing well globally. Here in the U.S., due to the markets and spot price and all the contract, all that manipulative type of activity keeps it from really being able to discover its true nominal value. But looking ahead, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, what are some good strategies? I'm not sure. Are you into the mining sector as well, or how would you suggest people really take in all this information and put it to use for their good?
Well, I think one of the things we've learned in this crisis is that the real source of value, economic value, really does come down to real resources that you can hold, and that the ephemeralness of keeping everything in the stock market is actually extremely dangerous. Because you don't know. I mean, there's so much of it works on psychology and baking in optimism about the future, and that's extremely volatile. I mean, a lot of people have lost a lot of money in the last 3 months, and nobody anticipated this. So it's really grim. I think what we're going to see is a tremendous emphasis in the future on savings. Actually, people are going to be looking for ways to hold on to cash, more and more and more cash, real estate. Not in the cities, and resources, real resources. That's what I think it's going to be our future. Oh, and by the way, one of the casualties of this crisis are all the people that have been railing against fossil fuels and calling for a Green New Deal and alternative energy sources and all that stuff. I think that entire movement is toast at this point. Really? Especially with the price of oil the way it is. Yeah, they're not going to get anything done. So like, the movement towards all the green energy and all that kind of stuff has just got no future whatsoever. And environmentalism in general, actually, it turns out a lot of the things that the environmentalists forced on us are actually disease spreading and kind of dirty. We don't like them anymore. Right. So, in my own local grocery store, they used to ban plastic bags and make you bring your own bag. Now, bringing your own bag is banned, and they make you use plastic bags.
So yeah, it's like they don't know exactly what they want us to do. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. Very nice question, I promise, because I could ask questions for days. So the Federal Reserve note, also known as the dollar, the show is called Rethinking the Dollar. Give us your 2 year, 5 year, 10-year perspective on what the Federal Reserve note, quote unquote, or dollar might look like within that time frame. Do you see that ultimate shift away from the reserve status of our national currency and how it will look in the future?
I do. A lot depends on U.S. trade policy and what happens in the future. But from right now, using if nothing else changes, except the critical elements that I'm thinking about here over the next 10 years, I predict that the U.S. will lose its status. The U.S. dollar will lose its status as the world reserve currency, and something else will replace it. Probably a big diversity of currencies, and that is going to impose a tremendous scare on American authorities, because we'll have to become a real country. again, where the behavior of your central bank really does get reflected in the value of the currency nationally. We've never been there before. I mean, not in anyone's lifetimes, actually, have we been there before, where we have to become a normal country, where we can't just keep relying on the world to sop up all the excess money creation. You know, it's all going to come home, and it's going to change everything. I just hope at that time we have some responsible central bankers that can behave without giving into politics. I do think the money of the future is going to trend ever more in the direction of private rather than government currencies, because we have the technology now. We know that it works. There's a widespread global demand for it. There's really no reason for central banks to continue to do what they're doing. Actually, they could probably just shut down. Whether they do or not, I don't think it's really going to matter that much, because I think the currency of the future is going to be mostly market driven. God knows, we've learned in the last 3 months, you can't trust government officials. So if that's true, the last thing you want them to do is to have a monopoly on your money.
Right, very true. Well, Jeffrey Tucker, it's been great having you here on RTD Interviews. For those that may not know where to find you at, can you point them back in your direction so that they can plug in with what you have going on?
Sure. Yeah. Just check out AIER.org. That's the American Institute for Economic Research. And we're posting articles like 2, 3, 4 times a day. And right now we got bigger traffic than the Rand Corp or even the Vatican. So, you know, we're a pretty popular website right now. And you'll get a lot of good information there. And you can follow me at Twitter at Jeffrey A. Tucker. So, but thanks for having me. It's really been nice to be with you and talk with you.
It's been great having you on. So once again, Jeffrey, thanks for joining us here on RTD. If you've enjoyed this, definitely give this video a thumbs up, share this so your family and friends can get a different take on what's going on outside of the mainstream narrative of just, you know, buy and hold and sit and be still and trust us. We'll take care of it. That, you know, you may not want to follow that model anymore. But once again, Jeff, thanks for joining us here on RTD Interviews.
Thank you.